Welcome to Keeping Score. I'm Gill and I gotta tell you guys, it's been my favorite Wimbledon ever. Thanks to you guys, thanks to the fun that I've had on YouTube. I've just enjoyed it so much, and I want to finish off strong. Although there will be a Steve Flink interview, I think you guys are going to enjoy today's show. I'm going to start with the final, the Wimbledon final. Novak Djokovic, Kevin Anderson. Novak Djokovic has won Wimbledon. He is back. I will get into how he beat Kevin Anderson so easily, what makes that such a tough matchup for Anderson, all of that good stuff. And then we'll rewind. We'll go back to the semifinal between Nadal and Djokovic and talk about the roof controversy. I wasn't able to address it after the match, but certainly something that people are talking about, and rightly so. I'll talk about, did it affect the match? Was it right, the roof being closed in the fourth and fifth set, despite the weather being good enough for the roof to be open on center court at Wimbledon? So I'll get into that. And then at the end, something I always immensely enjoy, comment response. From all of my videos this week, any video was fair game. I read through them all, so I want to go through these first two topics fairly quickly, so I have time to get to your comments. There's the thumbnail, Novak Djokovic with the trophy, and it was not even close on Sunday. As I predicted, the best of Wimbledon was indeed behind us. Djokovic went through Kevin Anderson 6-2, 6-2, 7-6, and I'm going off memory, but I think that was the score. You know, notice I never actually check the score to make sure I have it right. I just go off my memory. That's smart. But I think that was the score. Regardless, the third set was close. The first two sets weren't. And what Novak really had to do, for the most part, was just defend, be the wall that he is. That seemed to be the game plan he was going into with. He did not have to play offensive tennis. He really relied on his return and his defensive skills, remaining steady, testing the legs of Kevin Anderson. And of course, Kevin, after playing over 6 hours against John Isner, it seemed like it took him a while to really wake his legs up. And I think that can be certainly a challenge. If you're really sore and your body's in really bad shape, it can be hard to get that engine started. It seemed to get started, but even the mental fatigue from that had to play a factor. Still, I don't think Kevin Anderson, regardless of how fresh he could have been, had a chance against Novak Djokovic. It is a really terrible matchup. So first, I want to get into why Novak Djokovic felt like he could defend in this match, and that was good enough. How come Djokovic didn't feel the need to take the offense? He seemed to come in there and say, I'm going to play low-risk tennis. I'm going to make way less errors than him, and I think that I'm going to be able to break him down that way. I think it's a lack of diversity in Kevin Anderson's attack. So Djokovic came in there so confident in his defense. Why was that? It's not only on his side of the court. Yes, Djokovic has great defense, but against some players, I'm sure he would have to play more offensive. If he played Roger Federer, he wouldn't go out there and play as defensively as he did on Sunday. I think the reason he's so comfortable defending against Kevin Anderson is Anderson doesn't use all of the tools that a player can use to attack, and there are 5 of them. All of these factors can be taken away or added. Depth. So, for example, I won't go that in depth for all of them. No pun intended. You can take away depth. That's a drop shot. You can add depth. That's a ball that lands right on the baseline. So, one way to attack depth. Another width. Another pace. Another timing. So, taking time away. And then the last one, height. Kevin Anderson really just uses pace and depth. He does not use the width of the court very well. He doesn't mix up his heights very often, although he has a pedestrian backhand slice, and he doesn't really take time away. So in that sense, I felt like Novak Djokovic was so comfortable defending. Let's take a look at the third set tiebreak, and I'll show you kind of what I mean. This is Anderson serving at 1-2, so we're on serve here, and he's going to hit this serve down the tee. Now, he's going to get a chip return or a block back return from Novak. That probably means that Novak was anticipating the serve was coming out wide, and that's why he couldn't hit over this return. That's great news for Anderson, so he's going to get an attackable ball here. You see that ball lands inside the service line. It's really kind of, it's right there for Anderson to hit an approach shot. He's teeing it up, and look where that lands. That's just not good enough. That is 6 feet inside the sideline. That is 4 feet inside the baseline. It's not struck with this ball has no assets. So Djokovic is going to make an easy pass. There's the mini break, and here's the very next point. It's 1-3. Anderson's going to hit a really good body serve here. Djokovic doesn't get much on it. You see it's an attackable ball. If you pause it right here, Anderson looks to be in great position to rip this forehand down the line. And what does he do? The ball, you see where the ball lands. That's about, I want to say, 5 feet inside the sideline. It's maybe a foot beyond the service line. Once again, this is not good enough. On an approach shot, the two most important things are placement and timing. You got to take time away because, you got to get to the net. You got to close in on the net. And also, I think that taking time away is one of the most powerful weapons in attacking tennis. Federer does it, Djokovic does it so well, and even everyone does it so well. Who am I kidding? Andre Agassi, though, is probably the poster boy of that. But when you hit an approach shot, I would say it's different from like when you're trying to attack from well behind the baseline, where pace is probably very important. Depth is important in approach shot too, but pace and width are probably more important when you're far back behind the baseline. When you're hitting an approach shot, you don't really need pace. You need to place it, and you need to take time away. Kevin Anderson on this ball, he hit it really hard, and that's about it. So Djokovic is going to be able to handle this. Novak Djokovic can absorb pace as well as anyone, and he's going to slide right now, open stance. No one moves like this on the grass. It's so incredible what Novak does, and he's going to hit it at Kevin's feet. That volley goes long. So 2 huge points. If Anderson wants to win that third set tiebreak, and Djokovic gets too many breaks because Anderson has short forehands and he just doesn't do enough with it. Like I said, Anderson, I feel like he's Tomas Berdych with a tad of a better serve. Berdych, he hits it really hard. He can hit it really deep, but he's not. Why isn't he a overwhelming attacking tennis player? It's because he doesn't use enough assets. There are so many ways to attack, and these guys only use a few. So I think that's why Novak, who's a world-class defender, had an easy time defending against Kevin Anderson balls. It's also, of course, the return, though. I went back and I looked at Kevin Anderson's serving numbers against all of his relevant opponents at Wimbledon, starting in the third round. So he played Philip Kohlschreiber in the third round, Monfils in the fourth, Fed in the quarters, Isner in the semis, and then Joker. So first I'll read the aces. I'll read both. I'll read aces and first serve percent won. 22 aces against Philip Kohlschreiber. It was a shorter match. 87% first serve points won. That's tremendous. Against Monfils, he hit 20 aces. Now, Monfils is one of the hardest players on tour to ace. He's got the reach. He stands really far back. And he's so athletic. It's really hard to ace Monfils. So 20 aces, but 82% first serve points won. Really good. Against Federer, 28 aces. Of course, that was such a long match, but 76% first serve points won. So Fed did all right, but could have done better by at least maybe 5% or so. And then against Isner, 49 aces. Isner's the worst returner out of all these guys, and 84% first serve points won. So ace numbers, 22, 20, 28, 49. Djokovic, Anderson hit 10 aces and won 69% of first serve points. So Djokovic did 7% better than anyone else that Kevin Anderson played in terms of winning first serve points. And I noticed his main strategy was just to return it right at Kevin Anderson's feet and start the point like that. Wildly effective. So I guess that's pretty much all there is to say about that. Kevin Anderson, it was a really good run for him, but Djokovic is a terrible matchup. For sure a worse matchup than Fed, because it's just going to be harder for him to hold serve. And it's more likely that Anderson can find himself in some tie breaks or maybe, a late fifth set against Federer than it would be against a guy like Novak. Let's move on now to the roof, and to start off here, there's first of all a lot of misinformation, and I'd say the biggest misinformation is that Novak Djokovic said that he wanted to keep the roof closed. I read on Twitter Friday night that would be that in order for the roof to get opened, both players would have to agree to open the roof. That's what was reported on by a few people. But it turns out, it seems like, at least from what Novak Djokovic said, that reporting was wrong. Here's what Djokovic said on the roof after the match. He said, "The tournament organizers and referees said that the roof has to be closed because we started the match with the roof closed. They told us we had to play under the roof. I was for the roof because we started to play under it. I wanted to play in the same conditions." So if Novak is willing to admit that he wanted the roof closed, why would he lie about having no choice for it, right? I feel like there would be no reason for Novak to lie about this. So I believe him. I think that the tournament organizers basically decided this match is going to finish how it started. Here's what Nadal said. I don't think he said this in English, which I think it got covered a little bit less, just because I don't think he said it in English. He said, "It's an outdoor tournament. Okay, we start indoors. What I don't understand is today we could have started outdoors. Today we continued undercover because we started undercover. I don't think it's right. It's an outdoor tournament." The Nadal camp was very upset because Wimbledon, it's actually written in the rule book at Wimbledon that whenever a match can be played outside, it will be played outside. I guess the tournament organizers believe that, I guess it's a judgment call by them, I think, and that was their judgment. I don't know that it's written in absolutely definitive print that when a match starts under the roof, it has to stay that way. But I imagine that they're going to at least make that definitive after this, because I don't remember something like this really ever being a controversial issue. But that's just the way it went with the marathon semifinal to start. They had to close the roof because they needed to get some tennis in, and it was dark. Then they had to resume the next day. So first, I'll say that I sort of sympathize with Nadal here, but it has nothing to do with tennis. I think that Wimbledon being an outdoor tournament, I guess I don't understand why it's important that a match has to finish in the same conditions it starts. Think about a clay court. If it rains, if the clay court starts off, and of course clay courts are watered, but then the sun's beating down and it dries out, and then there's a rain delay. What do they? Do they dry the courts? That way it's the same conditions as when they started? No, you get a wetter court. So I don't understand the value of starting a match the same way or continuing a match the same way it started. Why does that matter? To me, Wimbledon has honestly been, and almost to a fault, they have been very, very stubborn about always playing with the roof open when possible. I think that sometimes it's led to unnecessary rain delays where they could have just kept it closed. And then I think other times it's led to less tennis because there's darkness suspensions. And I'm thinking to myself, why don't you just close the roof? So to a fault, they have stuck with this philosophy of always having the roof open. So it feels inconsistent. It feels like a pivot to me. And I sympathize with Nadal and his camp. In terms of the tennis, I don't blame Nadal fans for thinking it was such a close match, and we know that Nadal isn't as good indoors as he is outdoors. Think about the fact that Rafa Nadal, in his illustrious career, has never won a year-end final at the O2 Arena. He's never won it. I mean, that's got to tell you something. Those conditions, low bouncing, indoor, Rafa doesn't like that. I'd say the dirtier the conditions are, the better for Rafa for two reasons. It's the margin, number one, and the footwork, number two. When you have an inconsistent bounce, the footwork is the most important. So, I should say is more important. So whenever you have an indoor venue, The bounces are a little bit more steady. The ball moves less in the air. Wind, by the way, is coupled with the inconsistent bounces. Whenever you have wind, inconsistent bounce, the ball in the air, it takes more adjustment with your feet. Nadal has maybe the best feet in tennis. Well, Nadal and Federer have the best feet in tennis, I think, in terms of small, minor adjustments to the ball. So I think that when it's outside, Nadal is normally better at making those adjustments. And then it's also the margin. So many RPMs on the forehand, he gets more net clearance than everyone else. So when you have wind and factors like that, and I think that this is mostly because of the wind, the more margin you have, the less errors you're going to make because of the wind. It's as simple as that. I don't know how windy the day was in London. I'm not sure. And based on the way Nadal was playing, I would say, I don't know. I would say that it is what it is. I sympathize with Nadal. I understand the logic of if it was such a close match and Nadal's better outdoors, then, oh, he would have won outdoors. At the same time, the way the match was being played, it was Rafa trying to go for more. It was Rafa trying to, well, the serve is one factor. So I don't know, would Novak have served worse if it was outdoors? Would the wind have taken his ball toss? The depth perception is different. That's a factor. Was Rafa bothered by that? I remember Rafa missed an overhead in the early stages in the third set because of the roof. But once again, you're dealing with equal conditions. So Novak has some of those challenges too. It's really hard to say, but I'm going to end with this. It's a crappy thing to dwell on. It was a fantastic match. Both guys gave it their all. Nadal could have won. It was right there for the taking. Not that he choked by any means, but Novak came up really, really large. Novak hit on the dead run a forehand pass off of a blistering Rafa cross-court backhand. Are we going to point to the conditions when things like that happen and there's such a great match? I think that to spend too much time on this, to focus on this too much, is a black eye on this match. And the reason I didn't address it after is I didn't have all the facts. I didn't get to hear Rafa's side of the story. I didn't get to hear Novak's side of the story. So that's that. Let's move on to comment response now. No order in particular, I don't think, but it must have taken me almost an hour to read these comments because there have been so many. It's been the biggest week in this channel's history. Like I said, it's been so much fun. Let's get started here. Greg says, regarding your Isner comments, why do you speak so glowingly about John Isner's game when, in fact, he has half of a tennis game? Isner has an impressive service game but no return game, making him sort of an incomplete player. Isn't this why almost every slam set he plays ends up in a tiebreak? He can't easily be broken, but also he can't break anyone else. Other handicaps, his movement is really not the best given his size, and when taken past 4 sets, his conditioning is poor. Look, I'm not hating on the dude, but isn't this the reason why he can't make consistent headway against the top guys? I think he and Milos Raonic are in the same category. They're both unidimensional players that theoretically could win a fluke slam, but nothing more than that. I'm not sure Cilic at the U.S. Open was a fluke slam. By the way, I think that Cilic maybe could win another, maybe 2 more. Okay, on Isner. The reason I admire Isner so much is because there's nothing what I like to recognize and admire in tennis is people who maximize their potential. People who could not have been any better when it comes to honing their mental game, when it comes to honing their best physical self. But the reality of tennis is everyone is born with different talents. Sometimes, look, a lot of people have stories about why they weren't professional athletes, why they weren't professional tennis players. My parents didn't support me enough. My coach wasn't any good and he screwed me up. I got injured, right? A lot of people have excuses, but the reality is some people are born with the genetics to do this and some people are not. And everyone has different thresholds. My favorite player, David Ferrer, I loved him because I think that he was not overly gifted, but he was able to find himself a game that could maximize his winning potential. So I think for everything, bringing this back to John Isner, John is honestly too big. He's too tall. He works on his fitness very hard. I know that based on what other people have said. He'll never be a good mover. It can't happen. He was never going to be a good mover. He was just born that way. When it comes to his hand-eye, his ability to, hit great returns, he just doesn't have that. With that being said, first of all, his serve, he's obviously 6'10", but technically, it's one of the best in the game. It's not just good because he's tall. On his forehand and his aggression and his volleys, he's made so many improvements, but it's really the way he plays, the way that Justin Gimelslav and some of his other coaches have gotten him to play big man tennis in a manner that has probably never been executed before, in the respect that he refuses to hit any excuse me, that he refuses to hit any forehand without a completely aggressive mindset. I guess I admire the transformation John has made in his game, where he used to be a big server who stood 3 feet behind the baseline and just played like everyone else. And he's completely transformed his game. He won Miami. He just made a Wimbledon semifinal. He's playing the best tennis of his life at 32 years old. And that's just because he's changed his mindset. All right. Next one. This is a long one, so maybe I'll skip some parts of this. Banana Potato says, "Oh man, I'm really gutted and proud and okay with the whole thing all at the same time." That's a lot of emotions. "Would be interested to hear if you think this is the last chance Rafa has to win Wimbledon. It kind of felt like that, which is pretty poignant. Also felt it was important for his rivalry with Novak that he won today. Hope to be proved wrong, though, especially as I think Rafa would have won in an open roof situations." Your thoughts on that? So let me stop right there. I don't think that this is one of Rafa's last chance to win Wimbledon, and here's why. I think that before our eyes, Rafa Nadal quickly is becoming more and more like Roger Federer. He's using tools that are very effective on the grass court, like the way he was able to use his backhand slice this year. And sometimes in the past, he used his backhand slice because he wasn't confident in hitting over the backhand. Obviously, that wasn't the case for this tournament. He used that backhand slice in the best way possible, pulling Novak into the court and trying to kind of get him to come to the net where he's not as comfortable, trying to set him up for passing shots. That was one shot that Federer uses against Novak a lot that I thought, Rafa used. And look what he did against Del Potro, coming to the net, serving, volleying. Rafa is adapting his game so well that I basically think, and I got to mention the improvement on the backhand as well, that I think that he has more Wimbledon contention, more years of contending in Wimbledon ahead of him. He's really got to figure out the return, because he's a good returner of server on clay, and he's just not his return isn't good on grass. And I guess it was better this year than it has been in years past, but that's the number one thing to figure out. And then a lot of people have been talking about the serve. I'll get to that a little bit later. Let's see. I'm proud of him. Let's see. Should I read this? So for him to take Novak deep into the fifth, to fight and make tactical adjustments and lose by only 4 points and have equal winners and unforced errors as Novak was amazing. Obviously, it hurts that he had so many chances to break and set points before that set, but Novak played really well. So I just have to say well done to him. It's so good that he's back at his high level. Yep, I agree with that. Would be really interesting to see them play each other on a hard court now, too. I feel like Rafa's found a blueprint to play against Novak that he needs to stick to and resist the urge to avoid that like he did at the very end of the fifth. Do you think he can/should be trying to make adjustments on his serve to help him with the faster courts, or is it too late at his stage in his career? Okay, so two things. First of all, of course, I'd love to see them play on a hard court too. I think that it's probably a little bit better for Rafa than a grass court still. Okay, the blueprint that he's talking about, I think, is to hit a lot of forehands down the line, and to, I guess, try to strike first that way, and to have aggressive directionals and not let Novak push him around. When he hits the forehand cross court, he needs to be super diligent. He cannot hit it spinny. He needs to flatten it out. He needs to get good depth on it, all that good stuff. Is that a blueprint? Maybe. Also, using the drop shot a lot worked really well. I guess it's a blueprint. I would say yes. I think that he really did have a good vision in that match. And I think that when Novak was dominating Rafa in, I guess, striking manner, Rafa was getting pushed around by Novak and playing a ton of defense. Even in, for example, the 2012 Aussie Open final, the 6-hour match, if you look at that match, Rafa did so much running, so much defending, and he was just defending so well, and he was such a brick wall. He fought so hard, so much resilience. But I think that this was a match where Rafa did not allow Novak to push him around, and that's a huge positive. On the serve, I 1,000% expect Rafa to start hitting really big serves at the U.S. Open. Like I said, he did it sort of at the end of the fifth set, or not the end of the fifth set, the entire fifth set against Novak. But I think he's going to watch that match, and I think he's going to realize that it was the serve that really escaped him in this match, and the return. But maybe he could have equaled it out if he was able to serve bigger. I think he realized that after the fourth set, but I'm super interested to see how he's going to serve over the hard court swing, because I think he's going to start flattening it out and kind of maybe serving like he did at the 2010 U.S. Open. I know he did injure his shoulder, but I don't think that you can really – I don't think you can play with a fear of injury, really, and have the success that you're looking for. And I think that goes really for any stroke. I'm not sure. Maybe there's differing philosophies on that. But if you're diligent, Rafa's such a professional. He's done such a good job with his patellar tendonitis. I think he could figure out his shoulder. Let's go to the next one. These will start getting quicker. It is actually very sad to see that you have to show reaction in thumbnail. Otherwise, people mistake this as a highlight video and bombard your video with dislikes and hate comments. I mean, are we that dumb to understand that this is an analysis and match preview prediction channel? I cannot believe this. Me either. And that is all. I just wanted to read that comment. I agree. Aaron Smith says, so incredible to see Djokovic back to near peak form after many people writing him off these last few years. Love your technical analysis. It seems the big three are like rock, paper, scissors when it comes to how they match up. Nadal gives Federer problems, Djokovic gives Nadal problems, and Federer sometimes gives Djokovic and Nadal problems, ? Okay, it's not a perfect analogy, but you know what I mean. Federer can bug both of them. I'd say that what Roger has done that they have not been able to do is just complete and utter consistency. Roger is always there. If it's a weaker field, if one of them is injured, if one of them is out of form, Roger is always there to take advantage, and he's been able to beat them enough when they are in good form. So I'd say that for Roger, he has not had to deal with injuries. Credit to him. He has not dealt with crazy ups and downs like Djokovic just experienced. So the number one thing for Roger, I'd say, is that. But I just kind of wanted to read this comment because I guess that's interesting, sort of like rock, paper, scissors. Look, styles make fights. Styles make tennis matches. That's why numbers aren't tennis. That's why you can't say these are the numbers and this is why this is going to happen in a match, because that's not how this sport works. That's not how soccer works. It's a little bit more how baseball works. Look, analytics are great. There are some good analytics, but at the end of the day, a rally in tennis is such an intricate thing, such a complex thing. I don't think that basic statistics, for that matter, can really do this sport justice. Now, with that being said, I know how powerful math is. If we get super, super, super nerdy people to find complicated algorithms that none of us can understand, then yes, they can probably do a better job of predicting the match than most humans and understanding the match than most humans. All right, I feel like we've talked about this already, but Demir says serve return was the key. Djokovic had a lot of easy points. Nadal had to fight for every single point. Nadal won more neutral rally points, but he lost this match because Novak served/returned better. I think that this was the prevailing sense. I think that this was the major point. There are so many different factors that it's very unfair to put this up on a big poster and say this is it. However, if there's one thing that I think resonated with everyone, it was this point, that it was really the serve-return combination. All right, a few more. Leave Astlis, I guess that's his name, says, Gill, nice analysis. I would like to know how you pick these little things and what game plan the guys are executing. I guess you get that by playing experience. With that, we can enjoy the matches better. I appreciate that, but it's not playing experience. But I'm glad you asked this question. I think it's a good thing for me to address. It's actually great coaching and hunger to learn about the sport, because this is a sport unlike soccer or football if you're not in the United States. I feel like football is a sport where you don't really need a coach. You can figure it out. You can pick it up. It's very natural. It's very natural to kick a ball with your feet. And, you know, there's certainly something beautiful about that. Tennis, unfortunately, you give someone a tennis racket and they're not going to be able to figure it out. Something like a kick serve is a completely unnatural thing. Nobody will instinctively hit a kick serve. No one can use their intuition to do that. You need a coach. You need to learn. So I think that the reason I've been able to do this is I listen very hard to smart people in the industry in terms of from the media. I've had great coaches. I've played a lot. I mean, I guess that sort of helps, but it's mainly having really smart coaches. And I've absorbed what kind of they've said, kind of like a sponge. And I don't only listen to when they're coaching me, and I've also worked as an assistant to head coach Chris Lewitt, is one of my coaches who's published 2 books, which you guys should check out. Lewitt, Lewit. Don't only listen to your coach when they're coaching you. Listen to your coach when they're coaching other players too. Unfortunately, also, there are a lot of subpar coaches in tennis. In fact, most are. I've been fortunate to have really good coaches. Ramon Galvez says, Rafa will win. Why? By the time the final is coming, the grass turns into clay. No more grass left on the baseline. The reason I chose this comment is because this is something that I see all the time. People say, oh, the grass is clay now. Here's my 2 cents. I haven't played on the courts, so I don't really know, as well as someone who could play on the courts. I would need to play on the courts to tell you this definitively, but my sense is this. The bounce isn't any different in the second week as it is in the first week. The bounce is the same because where the ball is bouncing, more oftentimes than not, that is a part in the court which has not been worn down. Unless you hit a ball in the center where the players land on their serve, then it's worn down. But if it's not, then the ball is bouncing in a part of the grass where it's not worn down yet. I think the big difference is the movement. I think the grass becomes less slippery, and I think it's a lot easier to move on. In the first week, I think it's a little bit harder to defend because I think the courts are pretty slick. But I think that the notion that the ball is going to start bouncing really high and play like a clay court in the second week, late in the second week, I don't agree. I think it's wrong. Last one here. Harry Prakata says, Murray has won a lot playing defense. Zverev seems a bit more offensive-minded than Murray was for a lot of his career. I believe the issue is Zverev does easily give up the baseline, but doesn't yet have the endurance, and more than that, defensive skills to win consistently like Murray would. So let me just respond to that first. Murray is so fast, so fast, and Zverev doesn't even come close really to rivaling that speed. So if you're going to play defensive with Zverev's speed, that's a very different thing than playing defensive with Murray's speed. Of course, presently he doesn't have super offensive skills yet either. In short, currently he is neither here nor there. I expect he will develop into someone who has better serve/offense than Murray while having solid defense. Looking forward. Okay, that's Glad you were looking forward to my quarterfinal predictions. Thank you for that. I think where Zverev can be better than Murray. Since we're comparing him to Murray, why not? It's really the serve. And Murray had a really good serve. 6'4", the tallest of the big four, maybe 6'3". I think there's some dispute there. But he's the tallest of the big four. He had a really, he developed a very nice serve, especially a nice slice serve, which was great on the grass. I think that Zverev can have a better serve than Murray ever had. I love his technique. He's 6'6". But I think it's a good point about him being neither here nor there. Not a great defensive player, not a great offensive player, perhaps decent at both. Here's my vision for Zverev. I think that maybe he could be sort of like a Del Potro, only replace the big forehand with a dangerous backhand. Maybe he can get that backhand to be one of the best weapons in tennis. I think there's a good chance of that. And then if he can do that, he has the serve, sort of similar to Del Potro, not an Isner Raonic type, but kind of right below that. He has the movement for a big guy. He can hit big off both wings. He's very consistent. So maybe he could be sort of like a Del Potro, but of course he'll never have that forehand. Maybe he can make up for it with the backhand. So that's all I have. Thank you for all your comments over the week, and thank you for all your support over the week. I've absolutely loved it. Steve Flink interview, he hasn't responded to my email, but I just sent it a couple hours ago. So no promises, but most likely, Steve Flink interview. I will see you next time.